Have you ever had that moment where you're watching a video in English or like listening to a podcast and you understand almost every single word?
Oh, yeah. You're nodding along, feeling great.
Right. You feel incredibly accomplished, like the language is just flowing into your brain. But then the second someone actually turns to you and asks a simple question in English, your mind just it goes completely terrifyingly blank.
You just freeze.
Exactly, you freeze. I mean, you know the words, you know they're locked in there somewhere, but your palms are sweating, your heart rate spikes, and the words just, they will not physically come out of your mouth.
Yeah, it's that ultimate deer in the headlights experience. And it is uniquely agonizing for language learners.
Yeah.
If you have the knowledge, right? But in that crucial moment, you're just like locked out of your own brain.
It's like the connection between your brain and your mouth just completely gets severed. Well, if you have ever felt that wave of panic, you are absolutely not alone. Welcome to this deep dive. Today's mission is all about Kachtunjaltingan.
Which is how to confidently communicate in English.
Exactly. We're going to figure out exactly why that freeze happens and, more importantly, how to just permanently stop it.
Yeah. And we are pulling our insights today from a really brilliant case study. It's a comprehensive 30-day English fluency challenge.
Right. From the speak-up sessions.
Yes, speak-up sessions. And what makes this source material so compelling is that it's not a textbook at all. It follows a teacher, Masu, and her student, Fizu.
Which I love because it's real.
It is. We get to watch them navigate the actual, messy, everyday hurdles of learning to speak a language naturally.
And what I really appreciate about this approach is that we're not going to be sitting here memorizing boring grammar rules, right? Or conjugation tables. If you're listening to this, you probably already know the grammar.
Really?
Today's about unlocking the hidden psychology and the literal physical habits that are required to actually, open your mouth and speak. We're looking at what happens in your neurology in that split second before you talk.
Because speaking a language, especially a second language, it isn't just an academic exercise where you just retrieve data. It's a highly demanding physical and psychological performance.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why do you freeze? I mean, you know the vocabulary, you've passed the written tests. What is actually happening in your brain during that terrifying moment of silence?
Well, according to our sources, the biggest culprit here is something known as the translation trap.
The translation trap. Okay, explain that.
Yeah, so it's basically the ultimate bottleneck for cognitive processing. Think about what happens when someone asks you a question in English. If you're caught in this trap, you aren't just answering a question.
Right, there's a whole process.
Exactly. First, your auditory processing center hears the English. Then you shunt that information over to your native language center to translate it. Then you search for the semantic meaning. You formulate your response in your native language, and then...
Wait, let me guess. Then you have to translate it back.
Yes. Finally, you try to translate that response back into English before you ever even send the signal to your vocal cords.
Wow. So you are basically running this massive software program that is just eating up all of your brain's RAM.
Pretty much, yeah.
I always picture it like having a mental middleman inside your head. Imagine you're trying to negotiate this really fast-paced business deal, but every single transaction has to go through this incredibly anxious middleman.
Oh, it's a great analogy.
Right. And he's desperately flipping through a bilingual dictionary. He just delays every interaction. It causes an absolute traffic jam in your working memory.
A total traffic jam.
So how do we actually fire this middleman? Like, how do we bypass him entirely?
Well, firing that middleman requires a fundamental shift in how you process the world around you. You have to train your brain to think directly in English.
Just directly.
Yeah, you have to remove that translation step so the concept goes straight to the English vocabulary. And the sources provide a really practical method for this, but it requires you to start incredibly small. You have to begin with raw visual input.
I'm intrigued, but, also a bit skeptical. Give me an example of how this actually looks in practice. Like, how small are we talking?
Okay, consider walking down the street and seeing a dog. For most learners, the visual cortex registers the animal, sends the image to the brain, and the brain immediately fires off the word for dog in their native language.
Yeah, automatically.
Right. And only then do they translate it to English. So to fire the middleman, you have to consciously interrupt that pathway. You look at the animal, and you force your inner voice to just say dog.
Just the English word.
Exactly. No native language first. You are wiring the English word directly to the visual image.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're building a new direct bridge. You're linking the English word straight to the real-world concept, completely cutting the native language out of the loop.
That direct link is the literal foundation of true fluency. And you build on that foundation by narrating your life.
Narrating your life, what do you mean?
The sources highly recommend describing your daily, mundane actions in simple English, either out loud or just, as an internal monologue.
Okay.
So when you open your eyes in the morning, you actively think, I am awake. When you walk to the kitchen, you think, I am hungry. Or, I need coffee. I am pouring the water.
Okay, I have to admit, that sounds a little ridiculous.
I know.
I'm just picturing narrating my own life like I'm the star of a very boring documentary about making coffee.
It feels entirely unnatural at first, for sure. But the cognitive science behind it is bulletproof. You're forcing your brain's language centers to process thoughts in the target language without the pressure of another human staring at you.
That makes sense. No pressure, no panic.
Exactly. And the source text notes that this transition will feel remarkably clunky for the first few weeks. Your brain will really want to default to that middleman.
Right, because it's a habit.
Yeah, but eventually, with consistent daily narration, your brain realizes the translation step is neurologically inefficient, so it simply drops it. And that is the exact moment you unlock natural speed in your conversations.
That makes a lot of sense when you explain the efficiency aspect. I mean, the brain loves to save energy, but there's a glaring irony here, I think.
Yeah. What's that?
The whole reason we hire that mental middleman in the first place isn't just because we're slow, it's because he's a perfectionist.
Ah, yes.
He is terrified of us sounding foolish, so he insists on double-checking the grammar before we speak. Which brings us to the second massive hurdle our sources highlight, which is our absolute obsession with not making mistakes.
This raises an important question, right? Because the fear of making a mistake is a huge psychological barrier.
Huge.
The text shows that anxiety, shyness, and overanalyzing grammar are the primary reasons learners simply give up and stop talking altogether. The perfectionism essentially paralyzes the vocal cords.
Wait, I have to push back on this a little bit. I get the idea of relaxing, but there are real-world stakes here. If I go to a job interview in English, or I'm trying to close a sale, and I just stop worrying about grammar and say something like, yesterday I go to the store.
Right.
Aren't I going to look completely incompetent? Like, if we just talk without filtering, won't we just build bad habits and sound sloppy to native speakers?
Your concern is completely valid, and it's the exact fear that keeps learners trapped. But we have to distinguish between high-stakes performance and the daily practice required to build baseline conversational muscle.
Okay, that's fair.
The source material reframes mistakes entirely for the learning phase. The ultimate goal of language is communication, not perfection.
All right.
When you prioritize flawless grammar over the act of speaking, you just get silence. In the framework of the 30-day challenge, mistakes are not your enemy. They are the necessary friction that causes learning. I mean, even native speakers stumble, use the wrong tense, or lose their train of thought in casual conversation.
Yeah, that's so true. Think about your own native language. We trail off, we mix up idioms, we constantly start sentences and abandon them halfway through.
All the time.
We are incredibly forgiving of native mistakes, but just brutal on ourselves when learning.
And we see this dynamic play out beautifully in the source material with the student, Fizu. Fizu has this continuous, frustrating struggle with the past tense.
Oh, man. Reading about Fizu's journey was incredibly relatable. Anyone who has studied a language knows the pain of the past tense.
Right. He constantly tells his teacher, Masu, things like, this morning I wake up at 7 or I drink coffee. He defaults to the present tense because it requires less cognitive load.
And what's fascinating is how Masu handles it.
Exactly.
She doesn't pull out a red pen, scold him, or launch into a 10-minute lecture on irregular verbs. She just gently echoes him with the correct form. Ah, you woke up at 7, you drink coffee.
That gentle, low-stakes correction is vital. Because Masu doesn't trigger his anxiety, Fizu's amygdala, the fear center of the brain, stays calm.
Which keeps the learning pathways open.
Yes. Through that continuous feedback loop, the correct tense eventually becomes automatic. If Fizu had been too terrified of sounding sloppy to even attempt saying, I wake up, Masu would never have heard the error, and he never would have been corrected.
There's one specific vocabulary pitfall mentioned in the sources that I think perfectly highlights why making slightly embarrassing mistakes is actually the fastest way to learn.
Oh, which one?
Fizu mentions that for the longest time, he used to tell people I'm boring when he actually meant to say I'm bored.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a legendary language learning trap.
It's hilarious because the meanings are disastrously different. If you say I'm boring, you're announcing to the room that you are an uninteresting person who puts people to sleep.
Right, like avoid me at parties.
Exactly. But saying I'm bored just means you currently have nothing to do.
The subtle difference between an N ending and an ed ending changes your entire personality.
Literally.
But that specific mistake is a prime example of how memory works. When you look someone in the eye and call yourself a boring person and they give you a very confused look,
You feel it.
you experience a tiny spike of embarrassment. And that emotional spike releases chemicals that lock the correct lesson into your long-term memory far more effectively than reading it in a textbook 100 times. You figure out the difference instantly, and you never ever make that mistake again.
The embarrassment literally cements the neural pathway. I love that. And to help manage that fear of making errors, the sources provide a brilliant overarching rule. Just keep it simple.
Simplicity is your best defense against cognitive overload.
Yeah.
Learners often fall into the trap of trying to construct these incredibly complex literary sentences because they believe that is what fluency sounds like.
Oh, totally. They'll try to formulate something like, I am exceedingly delighted by this unforeseen turn of events.
Meanwhile, they're opening the door for a dozen grammatical landmines.
Exactly. Yeah.
Instead, the text advises stripping it down. Just say, I'm very happy. Simple is powerful, and frankly, simple sounds much more natural in modern everyday conversation.
Okay, so we've tackled the mental middleman, and we've realized that the perfectionist inside our head is actually hindering our progress. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
If we drop the perfectionism, how do we actually train for the physical act of speaking?
Well, we often forget that speaking is a mechanical, physical action. Your jaw, your tongue, your diaphragm, your vocal cords, they all have to physically contort to form new sounds, rhythms, and intonations that they have literally never made before in your native language.
I always try to explain this using a music analogy. Learning English grammar is like learning how to read sheet music.
Oh, I like this.
You can sit in a silent room, study the notes, and understand the theory perfectly, but speaking English is like playing live jazz in a crowded club.
Yeah.
You can't stop the band to flip through your sheet music.
Yeah.
You have to feel the rhythm, trust your fingers, and just play. The only way to get good at live jazz is to build the physical muscle memory. So what is the best way to build that vocal muscle memory for English?
To carry your jazz metaphor forward, the most effective technique highlighted in our sources for building that physical automaticity is a practice called shadowing.
Shadowing. I've heard of shadowing, where you basically just parrot a native speaker.
Yes.
But honestly, I've always been a bit skeptical. It sounds a little mindless to me, almost like I'm just copying sounds without actually deeply learning the structure. Is that really what they're suggesting?
Well, the mindlessness is actually the entire point.
Really?
Yeah. Shadowing is the practice of listening to a native speaker say a sentence and then repeating it immediately out loud, trying to perfectly mimic their pronunciation and rhythm. You're actively trying to bypass the analytical part of your brain, Broca's area, which obsesses over grammar, and engage your motor cortex.
So when Masu says, I woke up early this morning, Fizu doesn't pause the audio to analyze the verb tense. He just immediately echoes, I woke up early this morning, matching her exact pitch and speed.
Exactly that. From a neurological standpoint, this repetition builds myelin, which is a protective sheath around the neural pathways connecting your brain to your vocal tract.
Wow.
You're physically rewiring your mouth to produce English sounds automatically without consulting the mental rulebook first.
And the sources advocate for a very specific, manageable time frame for this physical conditioning, right? The 5 to 10 minute rule.
Consistency will always beat cramming. Sitting down on a Sunday and trying to shadow audio for 3 straight hours will likely just exhaust your vocal cords and frustrate you.
Oh, yeah, you'd burn out.
The sources strongly recommend speaking out loud for just 5 to 10 minutes, but doing it every single day.
Tying it back to our earlier point about narrating your life, you could easily stack these habits. You know, you're doing the dishes and you shadow a short 5-minute podcast. You're building that physical muscle memory daily without carving out a huge chunk of study time.
That's the perfect way to do it. And alongside this physical output, there's a mechanical habit for input that the sources heavily stress, which is active listening.
Now, how does that differ from just like throwing on an English playlist while I answer emails?
Having English audio playing in the background is passive listening. It helps slightly with rhythm, but your brain is largely filtering it out as noise.
Makes sense.
Active listening demands full cognitive engagement. And there's a highly specific tip in the text regarding how to consume media, like watching a movie, to maximize this. Most learners intuitively watch an English movie with subtitles turned on in their native language.
Oh, I am completely guilty of that. It makes the movie so much more enjoyable because I actually know what the plot is.
It makes the movie relaxing, sure, but from a language acquisition standpoint, it keeps the mental middleman fully employed. The text strictly advises using English subtitles instead.
So you are hearing the English dialogue and reading the exact same English text simultaneously?
Yes, and the reason this is so effective comes back to cognitive science. As an adult learner, your visual processing center for reading English is usually highly developed. You can read well. But your auditory processing center for spoken English is weak. The words just blur together. By using English subtitles, you are using your strong visual skills to decode the weak auditory signals. You're building a bridge between the written words you know and the spoken sounds you don't.
You're literally training your ear by using your eyes. That is a brilliant hack.
It really works.
Okay, so let's look at where we are. We're thinking directly in English to kill the middleman. We're making glorious, embarrassing mistakes to cement our memory. We're shadowing to build physical myelin in our vocal cords. And we're bridging the gap with English subtitles.
We'll do it all.
But this is all happening safely inside our own homes.
Ah, yes.
So what does this all mean when you finally step outside your front door and a stranger asks you a question? Because that is when the fight or flight response kicks in, the prefrontal cortex shuts down, and the panic really sets in.
That transition from solitary practice to the chaotic real world is the ultimate test. And the source material addresses this high-stress environment by teaching the concept of using scripts.
When you say scripts, I picture an actor awkwardly reciting lines in a school play. That doesn't sound very natural.
I know it sounds rigid, but scripts actually create the foundation for natural fluency. Having pre-practiced scripts for highly predictable daily situations reduces your cognitive bandwidth.
Okay, how so?
When you know exactly how a standard interaction is going to unfold, it eliminates the panic. You aren't desperately trying to assemble vocabulary and conjugate verbs from scratch while a barista stares at you. You're simply hitting play on a chunk of language your mouth already knows how to perform.
Give us an example of how a textbook answer differs from a natural, real-world script.
The most glaring example is standard greetings. In almost every textbook, when someone asks, "How are you?" the student is programmed to reply, "I am fine, thank you. And you?"
Right, which sounds like an AI robot from 1995 just booted up.
Exactly.
Nobody actually speaks like that in a coffee shop.
Yeah. But the sources teach natural modular variations. A real-world script might be, "I'm doing well, thanks for asking." Or a casual, "I'm good, how about you?" These are pre-packaged chunks of language. You don't analyze them, you just deploy them.
And the sources go through very specific high-anxiety scenarios for these scripts, right? Things that happen every day, like going to a restaurant.
A restaurant is a classic high-pressure environment. A learner might instinctively try to piece together a direct translation and say, "I want the chicken sandwich."
Which sounds a little demanding.
Right. So the script moves you to a more natural, polite phrasing that you memorize as a single unit. "I'd like a chicken sandwich, please."
Much better.
Or asking the server, "Can I have a salad on the side?" Or when you first walk up to the host stand, simply saying, "Table for one, please."
It just smooths the entire interaction out. You don't have to consciously think about the grammatical structure of conditional verbs like I would like. You just know the physical sound of I'd like.
Exactly.
What about shopping? That's always intimidating because retail workers speak incredibly fast.
For shopping, the scripts are all about utility. Instead of wandering around a store in silence because you're too afraid to construct a sentence, you deploy the script. Where is the fitting room?
Simple.
Or, if you try on a shirt and it doesn't fit, you don't need to invent a complex explanation about sizing. You just use the pre-packaged script. Do you have this in a different color? Or do you have this in a medium?
And what if you get completely turned around in a new city? Asking for directions has to be the most terrifying real-world scenario. Not only do you have to ask a stranger a question, but then you have to rapidly process their unscripted answer.
Yes. The text provides a remarkably clever strategy for this exact moment. The script isn't just for asking the initial question. It's designed to help you process the answer.
Oh, how does that work?
So you ask, "Excuse me, where's the train station?" The stranger points and fires off a rapid list of directions. The crucial part of the script is to confirm the information back to them. You immediately say, "So I go straight, then turn left at the second traffic light."
Oh, that is incredibly strategic. You are intentionally buying yourself processing time, you are verifying that you actually understood them, and you are immediately reusing the English vocabulary they just handed you.
Knowing you have these predictable scripts in your back pocket dramatically frees up your brain's processing power. You aren't spending all your mental energy managing panic and grammar rules. You're actually able to engage in the human interaction. It makes you feel instantly more in control.
Bandwidth. By reducing the cognitive load, you actually have the mental space to enjoy the conversation. All right, let's pull all of this incredible cognitive science and practical advice together. We have covered a lot of ground today on this journey to Kastinjautiptioman.
We truly have. We've traveled from the internal bottlenecks of working memory all the way down to the physical myelination of the vocal cords.
So for everyone listening, here are your actionable takeaways from today's deep dive. First, fire the mental middleman. Stop overloading your brain's RAM by translating from your native language. Start tying English words directly to the visual world around you, even if narrating your coffee routine feels silly.
Yes, push through the silliness.
Second, redefine your relationship with mistakes. Your perfectionism is what causes the deer in the headlights freeze. Embrace the friction, remember Fizu's journey, and keep your sentences simple.
Communication over perfection.
Third, treat speaking like playing live jazz.
Yeah.
Build that physical muscle memory by shadowing native speakers out loud for 5 to 10 minutes a day, and turn on those English subtitles to bridge the gap in your auditory processing.
That is so key.
And finally, arm yourself with real-world scripts. Memorize chunks of natural language for restaurants, shopping, and navigating so you don't have to invent sentences from scratch when the social pressure is on.
It's a profoundly comprehensive approach, primarily because it respects how the human brain actually acquires and deploys language in real time.
Absolutely.
And I would love to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to ponder.
Oh, I'm ready. Let's hear it.
We've talked extensively today about training your brain to think directly in English to improve your conversational speed. But consider the deeper implications here. Languages are not just neutral collections of vocabulary words. They carry entirely different cultural perspectives, emotional resonances, and ways of framing reality. If you successfully fire that mental middleman, and you truly start adopting the direct thought patterns of a completely different language, how might that actually change your personality? How might thinking directly in English alter the fundamental way you view the world around you?
Wow, that is a wild concept to leave us with. Are we literally constructing new versions of ourselves just by learning to naturally order a chicken sandwich?
You just might be.
I absolutely love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. The next time someone unexpectedly asks you a question in English, I hope you take a breath. Remember that you don't need a middleman, and you certainly don't need to be perfect. Go out there, trust your muscle memory, and go make some truly glorious mistakes today. We'll catch you next time.